If you got your scriptures with you this morning, why you would come to Bible study without a Bible, God bless you. But the book of Galatians, chapter 2, we're going to pick up in verse 11. Verse 11. Grace. I know some of you spirituals went, she died 30 years ago. Some of you will get that later. Grace. Y'all see, some of you don't want to admit it as you watch that movie. Grace. What did you? What's the first thing that popped into your brain when we hear the word grace? Somebody. What now? Wait. Unmerited favor. Got over here.
God's riches at Christ's expense.
Remember that acronym, God's riches at Christ's expense, unmerited favor. We got good Sunday school answers right now. God's grace. There we go. The song, grace. That is,
Giving us something
what?
we don't deserve.
Giving us something we don't deserve.
Grace and mercy.
And mercy going hand in hand. I like to think of those as the two sides of the coin there. But grace. And that's what Paul is defending here. Paul is going to battle over is the doctrine of grace. The grace of God, really, some have described it, it's scandalous. It is that because when we think of grace, we still think in terms, I'm going to show you grace because you deserve it. Because in our humanness, because who are we nice to? We're nice to you. I'm going to be nice to you if you're nice to me. You not nice to me? I'm not going to be nice to you. Don't tell me you don't act like the way at work. Don't tell me you don't act that way at home. Hello? Think about the last fight you had. The last fight. Yeah, I know y'all never have fights, but the last uncivil disagreement that you had, okay? A misunderstanding that you had. Your misunderstanding that was declared at decibels above, whatever. But that misunderstanding, but you were wanting to receive grace, especially husbands, you messed up big time. You're wanting to receive grace. Are we willing to show grace? But see, in our humanness, we go, that person doesn't deserve grace. Well, that's the whole point of grace. Did you deserve the grace that God showed you? You didn't deserve it. And we love that. And we revel in that. But here's the thing. Even though we say that, but then we still live our lives according to the law. Because you've got it in your mind. Do you understand this? And I know we say it all the time, but I don't think it's registered. That you cannot do anything to make God love you more. And you can't do anything as His child to make Him love you less. You can't. Grace is not something you earn. That favor of God that He shows us is not something you earn by keeping some rules. If I'm a better Christian, God's going to love me more. I'm not going to get sick. There's going to be money in the bank. My wife's going to do what I say. All of these things. We think in these terms. If I just can do a little more, God's going to love me a little more, even as a believer. And see, that's what Paul is fighting here, because again, you've got a culture clash. You've got the Jews who have basically misinterpreted what God gave them in the law, in all of the sacrificial system. That if they did their Bible study, if they listened, they would remind it, all of that was supposed to be pointing to a Messiah, to one who has come, the Lamb slain before the foundations of the world, pointing to this one. That this was just a temporary cover. Just like in Adam and Eve, those skins that God killed the animal, that was a temporary cover. Again, pointing to one, because even you read in Genesis, He's pointing to one who's coming, who's going to crush the head of the serpent. Remember those? Yep. That's Jesus. He's going to take care of all of this sin problem, because that's what Adam and Eve basically said when they said, we don't trust you to determine what's good and evil. We want to figure that out for ourselves. Well, where did that get us? So that's what basically when they went to eat that fruit is that we're going to determine good and evil for ourselves. And that's what man has tried to do throughout history. And I was talking to my granddaughter. She's taking world history right now. And I said, well, where are you at right now? And she said, they're in World War II and going into the Korean War and then the Vietnam War. So some of us lived it. Some of us fought in it. Some of us, were there in the midst of it, saw all the struggles and all the clash and everything that went on. And we see that history from the Garden of Eden all the way through. You see the Tower of Babel. What was that? That was man trying to do the best he could to try to reach God, to try to attain the level of God. And that's what it's been about. But see, here's the thing. And that's what religion tries to do. Religion says, do the best you can. You do the best you can. You be good to your fellow man. Sounds like a song, We're gonna get up here and sing the Coke song. We're all gonna get along. We're gonna sing Kumbaya. We're gonna love each other, and you cannot do that in your humanness. That's what Paul begins to preach. So I've got these Jews over here, and they're keeping all the laws and the traditions. They've only eaten a certain diet. I mean, it's all about dietary laws. It's about what day I worship on. It's about who I hang around. It's all of these things. I've got all of these rules. And then you get they've had the Pharisees on them for all these years now, and they've added rule upon rule upon rule, because Pharisees like rules. Nobody here's a Pharisee, but Pharisees like rules. Okay? We like rules. But then all of a sudden, Jesus says, and even in the Old Testament, Jesus made room for the non-Jew in the family of God. Jesus says, I came for everyone, Jew and non-Jew, the Gentile. And you've got Gentiles over here. Paul goes and preaches. Well, first of all, we're going to read about Peter goes and preaches the gospel. Paul preaches the gospel. They're getting saved. They come from a total different background. Now, these over here, these Jews, they think they're more spiritual than the Gentile. And we have that today. I'm more spiritual than you because I don't do this, and I don't do this, and I do this, and I do that, and I've got my set of rules, and I'm more spiritual than you because of what I do. That's wrong. And that's where the division starts happening in the church. Grace giving you something you did not earn. And that's how we live. Not only are we saved by grace, we've got to live by grace. We live by grace. So Paul, basically, he's continuing to remind the churches in Galatia, because these people are coming in and telling them, no, it's Jesus plus you got to keep this and this and this rule. You got to keep the 10 Commandments. Jesus plus you got to keep all the dietary laws. Jesus plus you got to do da 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 da. Jesus plus you got to get cut. Okay, you got to be circumcised. That's a big, big deal. That's kind of like you're saved because of Jesus and you got baptized. Jesus and you take the Lord's Supper. I mean, we're celebrating the Lord's Supper today. And there's a lot of people still confused about that. That is not, you'll never hear us use from the pulpit the word sacrament. Sacrament. It is an ordinance. You say, that's not that big a deal. Yes, it is. Because if you, see, here's the thing. We as believers, we just rock along dumb, happy, and just fat, dumb, and happy. Just go along and say, oh, that's just semantics. No. Sacrament says that is a means of grace. What do you mean? That means I have to take it to receive the grace of God. I have to take the elements. I take in my mouth that wafer, and now here's a big old long word, transubstantiation. That basically that wafer becomes the body of Christ in my mouth. That I am taking the body of Jesus in me. Because Jesus said, take, eat, this is my body. He said, no, this is a picture of it. They believe the same thing happens with that grape juice. It actually physically turns to the blood of Christ because they need that as a means of grace. That's why there's certain religions. They're not trying to be offensive or anything, but they have to have last rites. You're getting ready to die. You've got to take that sacrament, the last communion, before you die, so that you make sure you're going to get into heaven. You've got to, and so that is what this particular religion celebrates every time they meet. They crucify Christ over and over and over and over again. Paul says, no, it's by grace. Christ was crucified once for all. He cried what? What did Jesus cry on the cross? It is finished. It is finished. It's done. It's completed. So Paul has shown is sharing this wonderful gospel of grace, that it is simply by placing your faith in Jesus Christ and all He has done. We talked about it last week, because we do not have to do anything because Jesus did it all. Nothing you can do can earn that salvation. And so He continuing to remind them as He wages this war to guard the true gospel of grace. Paul had risked his life to carry the gospel of God's grace to the regions beyond, and he's not willing for the enemy to come in and rob him or his churches of their liberty in Christ. It was this spiritual vigilance that leads Paul into this dramatic encounter. This is Freedom Fighter Part 2. Part 1, he took it to the council in Jerusalem, and he says, I want to set things clear. This is the gospel I'm preaching, the gospel of grace that was given to me by Jesus Christ. Don't y'all come in and start messing it up and start adding to it. Start adding to this gospel of grace. But then he finds himself in a situation, and he describes it to the Galatians, because he says, we're still wrestling with this. This is still a problem. And we pick up here, he has this encounter, and this time it's with Peter, Barnabas, and some of the friends of James. And so as we look at it, as we look at this encounter, the confrontation, first of all, the confrontation happens because of Peter's relapse. Peter's relapse. Okay? Look at verses 11 through 13. But when Cephas, remember that's also Peter, that's his other name, came to Antioch, I opposed him, Peter, to his face, I being Paul, because he stood condemned. Because basically he was in the wrong. For he regularly ate with the Gentiles before certain men came from James. However, when they came, he withdrew and separated himself because he feared those from the circumcision party. Then the rest of the Jews joined his hypocrisy, so that even Barnabas was led astray by their hypocrisy. Apparently, sometime after they had the council in Jerusalem that we talked about last week, Peter makes a visit to the believers in Antioch. He comes down from Jerusalem. And you see there, he's enjoying the freedom of fellowshipping with the fellow believers, because the church was marked, the early church was marked by fellowship and spending time with one another. That's what we think about when the whole purpose of our Supper 8 groups and the times we gather. We gather here on the Lord's Day and fellowshipping and getting to know one another, encouraging one another. And you didn't have to show some kind of card that you've gone through this and this and this to get into this fellowship. No, you are a believer. You make this testimony that I'm a believer. So he's fellowshipping with his fellow believers, and he's not discriminating between Gentile and Jew. They're coming together. They're coming together. They're eating together. They're fellowshipping. And eating was a big deal with them. Because remember, we talked about this last week, you're a Jew and you've been raised, I don't eat pork. And I don't eat things that are unclean. And I don't eat this and I don't eat that. And so here comes your Gentile brothers, and they got themselves just they're putting on the feedback. I mean, it's just they've got everything that you are ever supposed to eat. I mean, they got fried oysters up there, they got some fried shrimp, and they've got some pork sausage up there, they got a big old slab of ham. I mean, making themselves a ham sandwich, and they're just free in Jesus. They're free in Jesus. I love Brother Herbert's describe. He said how free he was in Jesus. One of his old preachers said, "I'm so free." Let's see if I can put it together right. I'm so free, I can sit under my Christmas tree eating Easter eggs dressed like Santa Claus. I'm just free in Jesus. You know, because a lot of people, I was raised, it was hung up on that stuff. Hung up on that stuff. We still got people in our church today, they're hung up because we have a Christmas tree in the church. Oh, that's pagan. Lord, love it, Doug. But anyway, there's people, so he said he enjoyed this. See, after all, you remember the story we find in the book of Acts, where he was the one that opened the gospel door to the Gentiles when he went to Cornelius' house. We talked about that again last week. And that Peter, obviously, he understands. It's not that Peter's doing this out of ignorance, what he's fixing to do. He understands. God has opened his arms wide to the Gentiles. Cornelius was the Gentile that he came to his house. He shared the gospel, but God had to convince Peter that it was okay to go to, because that's how bad it was. You just didn't go. You didn't go to their house. You didn't walk on the same side of the street as them. And now we're going to go to church together. Can you imagine? Can you imagine? Well, it wasn't so long ago in our history of our church, of not our church, but of our country, where you went to church, you went did this and did that based on the color of your skin, based on who you were. You didn't fellowship. You know, you didn't come together. And it was based on the color of our skin, based on pigment, which is the most ridiculous thing in the whole world. But we did that. And see you know what they did it? They did it in the name of Christ. They did it in the name of, they did it of using the Bible to defend it. To defend what they were doing, how they were treating people. Because, and how wrong. And you look throughout history. You look at the Great Inquisition. You look at all the things that were done in the name of Christ. The Crusades. Some of the bloodiest time in the history of man. They were doing that in the name of Christ. In the name of Christ. And so here we see Peter going, I'm free. I'm able to go, and I understand this. See, and if you even look back to Matthew 15, Jesus had explained it to Peter. Because Peter was wondering about all of this, and he explained it in Matthew 15 when he reminded Peter that it was not about the outward rules. Because again, the Pharisees, because that was when the Pharisees came and said, time out, Jesus, your disciples, your followers, they're not following the rules. They don't wash their hands according to our rules. They had rules on how you're supposed to wash your hands. You know, and it wasn't singing the happy birthday song that we all were reminded once again, as we went through all the COVID and everything. Which I'm just reminding you of stuff that your mama's told you all your life. Keep your hands out of your mouth, out of your nose, out of your face. You know, don't cough in your hand and shake hands with somebody. And wash your hands, for goodness sake. Wash your hands. Your mama knew what she was talking about. But they had ways, and they said, oh, you're disciples. And they did this and they did that. Remember, they were calling Jesus out on all kinds of things. They were calling him out because they were walking through the field that day on the Sabbath, and they picked some corn because they were hungry. Oh, the Sabbath. The Sabbath. We got rules about that. Anybody raised that way? Come on now. Come on, raise your hand. I are one. Come on. I'm a recovering one. Come on. Yes, the Lord's Day, and we come home. All I know is Mama's working like a slave at the stove. The rest of us, we're rest day. It's rest day. We had a built-in swimming pool in the backyard. I love my daddy, and God bless him, he's delivered him most of this stuff. But anyway, we had a swimming pool in the backyard. You did not go swimming on Sunday. You did not go. That's the Lord's Day. You rest. You didn't go outside and play. You rested. You rested on the Lord's Day. That's what you did. And we didn't go out to eat on the Lord's Day because that was causing somebody to have to work on the Lord's Day. On the Lord's Day. Yeah. But it's okay for Mama to cook at the stove. I'm trying to think through this myself. I'm with you. And, all right, and when you went out to eat, you didn't go no place that served alcohol. And I remember the very first place we went that served alcohol was Red Lobster. Red Lobster. Remember when you walked into Red Lobster, there was the bar off to the side? Yeah. Oh my lands, I went. And so, you didn't do that. You weren't supposed to go to do that. So you went to Quincy's, okay? We had Quincy's and Ryan's. And now Cracker Barrel is serving alcohol. I mean, you can't even go to the barrel. But no, all these things. And you didn't go to movies. You didn't go to movies. Because you're more spiritual. You didn't dance. You didn't dance. Or wear pants. Some of you ladies. No mixed bathing. Why did you call it mixed? I'm not taking a bath with her. I'm just wanting but it's called mixed bathing. It's called mixed bathing. See, some of y'all are looking at me like, y'all know what I'm talking about. Mixed bathing. There's no mixed bathing, okay? And so, there's no mixed bathing. We weren't playing games with dice or cards. I remember playing, we would camp with other church families, and getting in trouble because it was the deacon's kids. But it was getting in trouble because we were playing matchstick poker. My daddy found out we were playing matchstick poker with matchsticks. Matchsticks. No, it's still gambling. It's gambling. You're going to go to hell for that? You are not, And so, no, you didn't gamble. And, y'all laugh at when the preacher goes, we didn't smoke or chew or run with girls that do. Y'all think that's funny. No, because some of y'all were raised with secondary separation. We're about being separate, so I can't be around you because you do this. But secondary separation, even though you didn't do it, but you were around her who did it, I cannot have fellowship with you because you hang out with her and she does things that I'm not supposed to do. So it's secondary separation. Y'all act like I'm crazy. But y'all know what I'm talking about. You know what I'm talking about. And so, no, we didn't do. And that's what, where my mom and daddy met? We weren't supposed to dance. You know where my mom and daddy met? At the square dance. At Garden City Square Dance, that log cabin that sat on the corner. Some of y'all have done that and been there. And so that's where they met. That's where they met. But anyway, I digress. And that's when I got in trouble. I got in trouble then, too, because this is good for the soul. Turn that off. Turn that off. Turn that off. I forgot you recorded it. Do not put this up. You can keep this for your archive. But we had gone to a friend's birthday party, her 16th birthday party. I guess it was, and her mom and dad they're gonna teach us all to dance, how to do the shag or whatever it was. I can't dance, but I'm terrible. But it was all 50s music and that kind of stuff. And so they were teaching all of us to dance and melody out. We learned how. And so I went home. Well, see, then my mama's Wesleyan holiness aunt was in town. And I said, well, she said, what y'all do at the party? And I told her, and oh my goodness, you had to have the thought we had gone out and done all kinds of stuff. But so anyway, so folks, we still have that legalism. See, for him, Jesus had said, it's not what's on the outside. It's not about the outside. It's not about the length of your hair. It's not about what you're wearing. It's not about the color of your skin. It's not about the side of town you were raised in. It's not about any of this that causes you to be holy. He said it's from the inside out, because Jesus said that's why salvation takes place on the inside, because he says out of the mouth proceeds what's in the heart. It's there's where it's coming from. So to eat with the Gentiles meant to accept them, to put Jews and Gentiles on the same level as one family in Christ. And that's what Jesus died for, to bring us together in this thing. So when we think about this, Jesus Christ died to bring together this thing called the church. Now, the circumcision party shows up. Oh, look what he says. However, when they came, he withdrew and separated himself. The circumcision party. Why? What does it say there in verse 12? There's a word there in verse 12. He was scared. He was scared.